AI is the biggest shift of our lifetime, and right now, real founders are having their aha moment and turning it into systems that print money. This is 120 Octane. Every week, we sit down with the operators on the front lines, the ones who took the lead, built the system, made it work, and they're sharing the lessons, the playbooks, and the tips that got them there. With your hosts, Avi Slavin and Alexandra Jacobo, your next aha moment starts now.
Welcome to 120 Octane, the podcast where founders, operators, and builders show us the AI systems they actually built. I'm Avi Slavin, and with me as always is my co-host, Alexandra Jacobo.
Hey everyone, really pumped about today's conversation.
Today's guest is doing something we don't see enough of. Most AI builders are pointing their tools at the biggest companies with the biggest budgets. He's pointing his at the opposite, and nonprofits. Small teams, big missions, tiny budgets. He's built AI tools that help nonprofit executive directors save serious time and apply for and actually win more funding. He's also running his own consulting practice in Claude Notion and a stack of automations. His name is Jake Putt. He is the president of GxP Solutions. Jake, welcome to 120 Octane.
Appreciate you guys having me on here today. Thank you.
This is one I've been really excited about. So much of the AI conversation is about replacing labor or cutting costs. Yours is about expanding capacity for organizations that need it most. Can't wait to dig in, Jake.
Jake, let's start with you for a second. Walk us through the path, right? How did you end up running an AI consultancy that specifically focused on small organizations and nonprofits?
Well, like a lot of small business owners, I got here by trial and error and figuring out what worked and what didn't. I come actually from I've had my business for about 5 years now. It hasn't always been automation based, honestly. This is all pretty new technology that we're dealing with. My background is actually, I spent a little over a decade in biotech and pharmaceuticals. My company, GxP Solutions, that's actually where the GxP acronym comes from. It's the regulatory body under the FDA for the early stages of drug development. So preclinical is where I used to work, and that's where I cut my teeth as a software developer in building internal tools for the organization that I was working for. Fast forward 10 or 11 years, and our business was doing really well. We actually sold and merged into a larger group right around the time that COVID was starting. I admittedly didn't fit in as well at a bigger company. I like a lot of autonomy with my work. So after about a year and a half, I decided to quit that job. And because we were in the throes of COVID, I was sitting there thinking to myself, well, everybody's trying to go mobile right now, and I can really help organizations do that. So along with the business I had been working for that still was using a lot of the tools that I had built, I had another local client or two in various industries that I had talked to that were willing to come along. And that's really what gave me the confidence to quit my job and start my business. And started off doing kind of traditional software development, building CRMs and systems like that for small and medium-sized organizations. And then when AI really started taking off a couple of years ago with ChatGPT 3 or whatever the version was, if I have that correct, obviously as a technologist, I was just thinking, if I don't adapt to this, I'm gonna be the first one that's gonna get the cord cut. And so I just started learning as much as I could about the practical uses of AI, given the types of client interactions that I already been having and how I could use these emerging technologies to further service the clients that I was already working with. So it's been a very natural, evolution as things have been changing, as technology has been evolving. I've tried to stay on top of it as much as I can, but ultimately it's all just in service of the clients and trying to provide them the best product and service I can. So
amazing. Thanks for that context, Jake. But let's move into, why nonprofits specifically, right? You could be charging, enterprise rates, building for very large companies or SMBs. Why nonprofits specifically?
I am fortunate to live in an area where we have an incredibly dense amount of nonprofits for our population. It's something in the water, I guess you could say. But my community is very nonprofit forward. And as I've gotten to be more involved in the community, I have a young child right now. Our roots are where we're living. I started looking around and wanted to do some more volunteering and got onto a couple of boards and just realized, wow, I really like working with these mission-driven people. It was a pretty drastic change from going from strictly commercial clients where the bottom line is the bottom line to nonprofits where the bottom line is the mission. It's who they're serving. It's serving their population and as many people in that population as they can. And I just found that I had a real affinity for working for the people who were willing to start those organizations, who were willing to pivot away from a corporate, corporate environment that they may have worked in for a while. And I just found a lot of fulfillment and motivation working with those types of organizations and people that were serving our community. And I just hadn't really felt that before in working with commercial clients. And it was a bit eye-opening. It wasn't purposeful, I'll be honest. It's something that I kind of grew into. And now that I've worked with a number of them, I'm realizing, geez, the need is, they have no less need for things like capturing data so that they can get more grant funding and appeal to more donors and all those kinds of things, let alone all the operational hurdles that are relatively similar to what commercial businesses are having to do anyway. So I was finding that those nonprofits, to your point of this question, were being underserved by people who could be selling this technology or something like that to larger enterprises. But, for small businesses, small differences, small automations can save one person, 4 to 8 hours a week. And that one person might be 50% or, the organization. So really big impact, really immediate impact. And frankly, just the fulfillment that comes from working with organizations that are giving back to, my neighbor down the street. So.
Got it. So what I'm hearing from you is that you kind of accidentally got into this space. You had a chance to really immerse yourself with these nonprofits, but was there some kind of a pattern or a problem that you kept seeing in the nonprofit space that made you realize that, hey, maybe I can add some value here? Is it just the fundraising? Is it saving time? Walk me through some of the problems that you kept seeing.
I mean, honestly, one of the biggest problems I was seeing was that a lot of these nonprofits, who admittedly there are technology vendors out there who give a lot of free or reduced cost versions of their systems for registered nonprofits. So just for example, not that they need me to sell their platform or anything, but Salesforce offers 10 nonprofit licenses for free if you're a registered 501c3. Okay, great. I was seeing organizations who might have 3 to 5 staff members, some of them part-time probably, that were trying to make Salesforce work for their organization. And I would go in there and ask them, why Salesforce? Why this great big monolithic SaaS application? Walk me through your reasoning. And most of those responses were, oh, because it was free. Or, oh, this person who's on our board use it in their corporate business, and so they just figured, let's just use it for this nonprofit because we know the platform. Well, that just is in my opinion, the opposite way that you should approach what technology you're using to help you run your organization. And I just wasn't seeing a lot of support beyond that. Even just what systems people are using to capture and report their organizational data. So it all started with that. Again, I can build things from scratch. I'm a software developer. So in my mind, it's like I can build a custom CRM for you in the same amount of time it's going to take a Salesforce administrator to build something that will adapt to your business. So I was really trying to become a partner for these organizations and not just have a technology that I was just handing off to people and saying, here you go, good luck, but a trusted partner to help them align with the correct technologies, ensure they're using them efficiently to capture all the data they need for those downstream efforts like fundraising, like applying for grants. And that's kind of how I've always worked with my smaller clients, to be that kind of trusted partner as opposed to just a technology vendor. So, and that's what I was seeing, was just a lot of technology vendors that were doing that handoff, have an hour of free online training that's not particularly effective. And I just was seeing a lot of small organizations struggling with the lack of support they were receiving from the people providing their technology.
Got it. Interesting. You mentioned grant writing, right? Which I've not had a lot of experience with grant writing, but I know people that have. And my understanding is that it's a beast. What does that actually look like for a small nonprofit?
Yeah, so nonprofits are interesting in that they can have a lot of different sources of revenue. So grants are a main one that a lot of organizations rely on if they can't generate revenue from the services that they're providing, which is pretty frequent for nonprofits. So whether it's local granting bodies, community or family foundations, up to state level grants, or even federal, if you're lucky enough to be at that scale, grants are a means for organizations just to provide large scale funding for organizations to enable any number of things with the organization. So I've seen grants that are written for back office accounting support. So, you're a small nonprofit, you can't pay an accountant, a CPA to work at your organization. It's too much of an effort to ask a volunteer board member to manage your finances. So there are organizations where I live that specifically will provide grants to align with a local accounting firm to help provide that back end support for extended periods sometimes. A lot of times they're just capacity grants. So for the work that I do, aligning with a technology system to help you with your data insights and reporting and things like that. Maybe you ask for a technology grant that's going to help you buy into a new system that's going to help you with your data capture or something like that. But the grant aspect of writing a grant, these organizations want to know who you're serving, what those services that you're providing are. A lot of stuff that's reliant on you having good data and being able to report effectively on that data. And a lot of grantors want reports that are issued to them, back to them, to tell them how you're using their funds. So that's another part of it, is the tracking of how we're actually using that $10,000 that somebody gave to us recently. And all of those things, we're talking about small organizations. They don't have business analysts, at their, or data analysts at their organization. So it's a big effort to pull data from multiple sources, to be able to analyze that information, be able to calculate your high level aggregated metrics, and then to actually sit down and write the reports in a way that appeals to this organization to hopefully give you the funding. And those things together take a lot of consideration, a lot of effective data for your organization, and just a lot of time. So I try and do all kinds of things for my organizations to help alleviate those kind of repetitive administrative tasks, whatever you want to call them, but just to help take off some of the heavy burden for these small organizations so that they can apply for more funding or whatever it may be.
Got it. And so when did you first think that AI could fix this? Was there an aha moment? Was there something that came to be? Was it a certain time period?
So I have always focused on, with my clients, when I go into an organization and we start talking about automation and using AI and all those kinds of things, the first thing that we always tackle, or that we always talk about, are what are your redundant, repetitive, and administrative tasks. And by that, we mean the things that are not revenue generating, they're not client facing, they're the back office things that really help us run the organization or, do those kinds of tasks. So as I'm realizing this and talking to some commercial clients, and I start getting out and talking to some nonprofits and realizing they have, even from inception, these organizations have these really intensive data needs to both storage and reporting so that they can acquire this funding and things like that. And then through one of my local organizations that I'm in the board of, I was giving a little automation demonstration to commercial businesses and had someone come up to me at the end of it and say, hey, will you come in and talk to our executive director at my nonprofit that I'm on the board of? Because I know that she's struggling every month with getting us these executive director reports that help to inform the rest of us on the board and on the staff, everything that's going on in the organization. And when I started thinking about it and started thinking about how I had already been manipulating and moving data around for organizations and passing it between systems and using AI to help make decisions without a human element, it just that's when it clicked that I was like, wow, these organizations have less resources in terms of money and personnel. So they're really the ones who are going to be benefiting the most from these kind of enabling automations.
Absolutely. I appreciate the color there. Thank you, Jake.
Yeah.
Hey, Jake, so your LinkedIn says that you believe in the AI mindset, empowering people to use AI confidently and responsibly. Where did that conviction come from? And was there a moment when you saw that what AI could do for a small team, especially like in the nonprofit? Or was it like, aside from the automations and the grant writing, was there anything else that you felt?
It could be anything. I gave a little talk to a local college's computer science class last fall called the Era of Entrepreneurial Enablement, which is something I truly believe. And enablement is the key word there. And when I say AI mindset, that's kind of what I'm talking about. I am not going to sit here and advocate for tens of thousands of people losing their jobs at the enterprise level, all in the name of AI and automation. However, these small organizations that can't pay to have another $50,000 a year person to be a data analyst or something like that, they should, in my opinion, they should not have to be restricted by that lack of resources. And today in 2026 is the best time to be living in that world, because the tools that are available to us, if you know how to utilize them, for dollars a month, you can build in such massive efficiencies. So for me, it's an approach of how can we further enable the work that our current people are doing, not how can we replace the work they're doing. And small nonprofits really lend themselves to that because they have small staff, and they really benefit the most from having their people be able to do more. Maybe you have one full-time staff and a couple part-time volunteers that come in. Well, if that part-time volunteer is giving you 12 hours a week, and now you can enable them in some way to accomplish twice that amount of work, all of a sudden now that volunteer, your organization is just all the better for it. So it's all about targeting the right process and choosing the right small ways to step into this, instead of thinking that we're going to flick a light switch and all of a sudden everything's going to be automated and we're all going to go home and everyone's only going to have to work a day a week.
Right.
It's not where we're necessarily going, but
Great. So what I'm hearing from you is that you actually help each nonprofit, because obviously, given that there's different areas, sectors, right, within the nonprofits, that you're the one that comes in and you help them understand what could be breaking, right? And then, or not necessarily breaking, because like you said, you have volunteers that are coming in and, they're limited in their hours, but you help them see those gaps that they're missing and where AI could come in and assist them.
So, yes. So, for example, an executive director at a small organization, there are a lot of operations of the organization that they are inherently very tied to. I mean, they're effectively the CEO or whatever you want to call that role at a smaller organization. They, though, have a lot of duties that you wouldn't even find at a small corporate or commercial business, where relationship building to establish better fundraising is a huge part of what effective executive directors do. That still, I don't know if people are going to not want to hear this, but that's still done best face to face in your community. That's not going to be done online. You know, you have to get out there, you have to knock on doors, you have to meet people where they're at, you have to go to networking events, you have to host your own events, all those kinds of things. And that's how you convey your message, your mission to people. That is where a lot of that time is most effective for these organizations. That's how you bring in the people that are going to be your recurring donors. That's how you make relationships with the foundations that are going to be issuing the grants. That's how you just instill confidence in the mission. So the more time that we can give those people to go out and make those relationships and build those types of the organization, and the less time they have to spend pulling their hair out. I've already done that myself, but pulling their hair out to write a report that's, you know, even if they have the tools that show great dashboards and have reporting functions themselves, putting all that information together and writing a report takes a lot of time. That's an administrative task. No one is paying them. No one is giving them money. No one is donating to the organization because that executive director is spending 4 hours a month, 4 to 8 hours a month, sitting down at their computer and typing out a report. That's not the way these things work. Right. So if we can give that day back to them and remove that administrative task, it cascades. It's not just the time they're saving, it's where else they can focus that time. And it's the removal of the headache that allows them to just approach their work, with more freedom and more ability to work through issues instead of just always feeling like you're putting fires out.
Right. That's very well said. Thank you.
Okay, let's get into what you actually built, right? So you mentioned you have 2 tracks here, right? You have apps for nonprofits, and then you have automations for your own business. So let's start with the nonprofit side. Would love for you to walk us through the grant writing assistant, and I think you have a demo. Is that correct?
Yeah, I can show that real quick here. Let me pull that up.
And while you're pulling it up, I think it would be really useful if you could explain really what the tool does, right, end to end. But also, who uses it, right? Is it the executive director? Is it a grant writer? Is it a volunteer? Would love to see, the input and output if that's possible. Would really love to understand, how long it takes to write a grant the old way versus this, and maybe if you can give us an example. I'm curious to see what that looks like. So, by all means, please start sharing your screen.
Sure, will do. Let me pull up the right window here. I got this guy here. All right, they look pretty good here.
Yeah.
Okay, so what you are looking at right now is a tool called N8N, which is up here in the upper left corner.
Yep.
N8N is an automation engine. It's a workflow development platform. So if anyone has heard of Zapier, this is very similar to this. I use N8N. It gives me, as a programmer, a little bit more freedom, and it's open source, meaning that it can be free if you're willing to host it yourself, which I like because that
Hold on,
allows...
Jake, do you think you could zoom in a little bit?
Oh, yeah, so I will go through this.
Got it.
It warrants showing the entire thing, and then I will go step by step here so that you all can see this. Yes.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
But this tool it's a programmatic tool, but it allows people who don't have programming experience to see the actions of what they're trying to automate and have a lot of control over that. So that's what the tool is here. This automation here, which I've, for the purposes of this demonstration here, and not using any actual confidential data from any of my clients, I've dumbed it down a little bit. And all that I mean is that the demo you're going to see here is not the front-end user interface that organizations would typically be seeing. You're going to see a little ad hoc version of it here, but the process is really what matters. So the way that something like this works, is that large enough for you all to see now?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
And then also we will have listeners that won't have access to actually viewing it themselves. So if you can just specifically say like, hey, this is what I'm seeing right now, showing you.
Great.
Thank you.
So I'm showing a window for a tool called N8N, which is a workflow development tool, which operates by defining individual nodes of action for whatever the process is that you're trying to build. So I'm showing a way for users to have on-demand AI-generated responses to grant questions based on their real organizational data, as well as previously established tone of voice and writing examples. So this is very important because first thing to say here is that I think everyone who goes on Reddit or Facebook or anything like that will say that there is anti-AI sentiment that's pretty rampant out there right now. And I'm not here to litigate any of that, but the idea here is to make our grant responses not sound like ChatGPT just regurgitated some, aggregated information across the internet. So by including the organization's data, real data, and previous human written writing examples, we're able to establish a tone of voice and a way of responding to our grant applications that make it sound, quote unquote, not AI. So that's one of the goals here. The other one is obviously to save a lot of time by providing the information that the grantor is asking for in their application without the user having to go and assimilate data from multiple different data sources. So node number one is on form submission. That is the triggering event here. So what this is going to do is it's just going to bring up a very simple, typical web form where it's going to ask a couple questions. Who is the foundation that's issuing this grant? What's the actual question we're responding to? What length of response are you looking for? And what is the date range of data that we should be using here? So that's number one. Number two, for the people who can see it, I have a code node here, which is going to operate a little bit of code. It's JavaScript. Not going to get into what this is, but basically it is preparing us to make our AI call later.
Okay.
Then what we're going to do is we're going to call another workflow that's actually extracting our data here. So which one is that here? So I have another workflow that is being called, and I'm going to zoom in here on the 4 different Google Sheets from which it is pulling this data.
Okay.
An important note about this is that these are Google Sheets for this demonstration, but any online data source is accessible to this tool. So I have automation set up that we have a node here for fundraising data, service applications, services actually provided or rendered, and volunteer interaction data. All of those are in spreadsheets for this demo, but I have clients where our fundraising data is in one tool, our services or service applications and services provided is in a CRM, and then maybe our volunteer data is in a Google Sheet. The point is, it doesn't matter. If we can get data out of them, we can run these automations. So I'm showing this. This is just the workflow here that is actually pulling the data out. And I'm doing things on the back end after this retrieval to do things like redact personal identifying information. Because when we're writing grant responses or reports, we really only care about the aggregated data unless there are outliers or other touch points that need to be specifically called out. But for the most part, I don't care about people's names. I don't care about addresses. I don't care about that type of information. So we just scrub that all out, and that helps us make sure our data is even more secure. We compute some summary statistics, and then we just output it back to our previous workflow. So I'm now back on the grant writing assistant. We have extracted our organization's data at this point. Now we're going to extract our writing samples, which in this case are in a Google Doc. So again, any online data source, just pull from that. Then I have a code node here. Yeah,
Sorry,
please, go
going
ahead.
back real quick. So here you wrote load writing samples. Would that be also samples from their previous grants that they have written, like so that way it's in their
Exactly.
language? Okay.
That is exactly what that is. And I can, without hopping back and forth between windows,
course.
but I can show exactly what that document looks like here. Then I'm writing basically a prompt for AI. So anyone who's interacted with ChatGPT, Claude, any of those LLMs, I'm essentially just building a prompt that then we are going to send to OpenAI's backend. So it's the exact same technology when you're dealing with the interface for ChatGPT or any LLM. The only difference is here, I'm sending commands to their servers on the back end instead of having to interface with the chat interface.
Can I ask you a quick question here, too?
Please.
I see that obviously you're doing a call to OpenAI. I'm assuming that you're bringing in your API license on the back end to make that happen. I'm assuming you could swap any large language model with this, right? If it's a Gemini,
Absolutely.
if it's an
Yes.
Anthropic with their Claude. Why OpenAI versus Claude? What makes you choose? Is it the output? Is it the cost? Is it a mixture of both? I'm just very curious. This is something that I always like to ask, why they chose a certain LLM over another. And so please.
The only answer I have to that is testing.
Okay.
Consistency of testing, because ultimately, so I have licenses both for Claude and for ChatGPT. I typically, for my automations, use ChatGPT because through my testing, I have found its responses to be the most consistent given the parameters that I'm giving it. However, when I'm not building these workflows, I use Claude for almost everything else. So I use Claude coding assisting. I use it to help me do writing. That stuff I use Claude for. But for whatever reason in my testing, I found OpenAI's API to be the best. And at the scale I'm doing things, cost it's almost inconsequential because the calls that we're doing here, this example I'm showing here, this is going to cost cent or less to make this API call here. And everything else outside of the OpenAI call is free because all we're doing is pulling data from existing services. So this is the OpenAI call is the only cost to this entire automation other than the setup of.
And just for our listeners, right, this N8N, can you explain to them how the pricing works there?
So N8N only charges you money if you use their cloud servers to host this platform. So for me, I have a little virtual private server that costs me $4 a month. That is sufficient for me to have a cloud hosted version of N8N for my testing purposes. That's a pretty small server in terms of processing power. I wouldn't use that in production for a client, but for $12 a month, you can achieve what you need. So N8N is my preferred tool because it's open source. You can run it on your own local laptop or desktop, absolutely no cost. So that's why I like this. Other tools are going to immediately charge you a subscription, and they throttle what you can actually use on the platform. Whereas N8N, if you want to locally install it and you have the hardware or the virtual servers to run it, which is accessible to everybody, frankly, for a couple bucks a month, you can run this and that's your only cost. And you can build as many workflows off of that as you want. You could have 50 different workflows and all you're paying for is that virtual server that's actually.
Yeah, appreciate the context there.
Yep.
Thank you.
That's cool. So when the call comes back from OpenAI, it has now responded to our grant question from our data and from our writing examples. We're going to extract that information and we're just going to represent our answer to the user. So it's pretty simple and I can demo it here and it should only take a few seconds to actually do this thing front to back. So this is the web form. This comes built in with N8N. I've done very little editing here to create this. But again, we have to think of the use case here. For these small organizations, a tool like this might be all that they need. Now, I typically formalize the UI and the front end of this more than just this kind of simple, this simple web form. But it's still going to do exactly what we need. So let's just say our funder's name, which is the first field here, is just going to be, we're just going to call it Community Foundation. The grant question here is what we're actually responding to. So a very common grant question is, or just a request is, please tell us about the services that you provide and the population that you are serving, something like that. That is a very basic, tell us what you're doing here. Now, word limit, I'll put in 300 here just to keep it relatively concise, and then we'll do year to date because we could do past 12 months or something, all available data. Year to date is a pretty good metric anyway. That's it. So I'm gonna go ahead and reshare the workflow so that we can actually see that see this being executed here. Okay, so people who are seeing video can't see that web form up anymore, but it's still up. I'm going to click that submit button, and we're going to see live here as it goes through this process. And until it hits that OpenAI call, it's going to happen pretty quickly. So when I click submit here, it's already starting to execute. It's following our data extraction. It just loaded our writing samples. It's calling OpenAI right now. This takes a little bit because just like when you work in the chat interface. So how long did that take front to back? Maybe 10 seconds?
Not even.
I like how you said
So-
this takes a little bit as if it was going to take minutes, and it happened within seconds, which is incredible.
So now I'm going to reshare that other window here. And again, this doesn't look the prettiest because I've kind of taken away the UI here for the point of this demonstration. But what you have here is an AI generated response that's based on the data and the tone of voice documents that we already established here. The people who want to read this, AI in action is just what I've named this sample organization. But you can see here that it's saying year to date, we've received 35 service applications and delivered 45 individual services across our general service model. It talks about the population that it's serving and what types of services we're providing. It has a whole section on the bottom here talking about our community support and our volunteer efforts. It mentions the dollar amounts of the fundraising efforts that we've been able to achieve. None of this were for specific instructions. This is all generated from passing that AI model, the data that we extracted, the tone of voice documents, and that very basic form information, which really the only important thing there is what question is the grant asking us. And so like you said, that took 10 seconds. This isn't the most robust thing in the world, but believe me, even this would probably take someone a fair amount of time to pull that data, think about it, and actually sit there and write that report. What you have to consider is that this might be one of a dozen questions in a single grant application. So we're going to repeat similar processes over and over and over again for the grant application asking us different things about our organization.
Okay, sweet. Real quick before we hop on to the next section, I wanted to ask you, so obviously like you mentioned, right, the old grant way, the way to write a grant, the old way, right, that obviously takes a significant amount of time, and this automation only takes about 10 seconds. So what you're saying though is the hardest and longest part that it takes now is just providing you or providing the system with the information necessary for the back end. Am I understanding that right? That's like the hard part now, if you will.
The hard part for people without a tool like this is, in my opinion, it's putting the data together. It's having access to the data and being able to synthesize it, understand it, whatever you want to say, to be able to interpret that data and turn it into something that is a human readable response or report, basically. So that's what I find from people is the hard part from responding to a grant. It's not that they don't have the data, it's actually being able to put that all together in the format that grant application was.
Got it. Thank you.
Amazing.
Appreciate you clarifying.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jake. That's awesome. This is
Small tool that solves a big problem. And when you scale that up and you start, the more data you have, the better it gets. The more example responses that you have, the better these auto-generated responses have. The one thing I'll say is that when I'm giving people these tools, I absolutely always advocate for them to keep people in the loop. I would never tell one of my clients to take that raw response and just copy and paste it into the application without review. You still have to review these things. You've got to tweak them. But the goal with a lot of these automations in my mind is not removing 100% of the work. It's removing like 80 to 90% of the work. And if we can take something from 30 or 45 minutes down to 2 minutes, to me, that's worth not having a complete black box where we frankly have no idea what's happening.
exactly. And for our audience here, right, especially those of you that are a business owner, running a team, running a division, dealing with things that are going to take you a lot of time, right, a lot of monotony. Think of this example, right, as potential inspiration for what you can do with your business, right? This is grant writing with a very specific use case for nonprofits, but I bet there are thousands of other use cases of using this type of an implementation for your business. So just something to stew on. Thank you very much for that demo. That was really cool. And I hope that our audience had a lot of aha moments. I certainly did, and that was great. Let's switch gears for a quick second. You said that you also built automations for your own business, right? You said you do a lot of Claude and Notion interactions. You do email consolidations, right? So just walk us through what your day looks like running on these tools. And if you want to demo some of that, please feel free. If you want to walk us through that, that's up to you. But would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I can I can talk about a bunch of different things here. You mentioned Claude and Notion. Notion, for those who don't know, is it's a database tool. It's what I use to basically help me run my business. It's how I keep myself organized. It's a knowledge management tool, or I don't even know what they call themselves, but they're pretty big. They're used in a lot of organizations. The point is, I have a lot of data in there. I dump everything from the transcripts from my client calls into there on my client pages. It's where I take all of my notes. It's where I keep track of all of my tasks. So an example of an automation that I use is when I am using Claude to help me program. First, what I'm doing is I am setting up the scaffolding for what this project is supposed to be, and that includes the task or the steps in my development process. So when I'm going through developing a project, I will use Claude to help me create tasks based on the specifications of the project I'm building. Then, as I use Claude to help me build these things, I'm using it. It knows what it's accomplishing as tied to my tasks, and is able to supplement with information, check those tasks off automatically, mark ones as urgent, or, update them to say, hey, we didn't get to this last thing here, but we can't forget about it. So that needs to be called out at the top of that task page. That's a really simple automated workflow that just helps me keep myself organized and keep my task information up to date without really much of an effort. So that's a really small one. That can come pretty much out of the box with what's called an MCP connection between Claude and an external data source. It's just saying Claude has access to my data in Notion, so it's able to then interpret that data, update it, things like that. Another one that I can demo here. I hate email. I'm sure everybody else hates the amount of email that they typically get, especially as a solo entrepreneur. Email clutter is something that it just drives me nuts. So, however, I have to go out and I have to do a lot of business development and networking. So I have to be subscribed to a lot of local or regional organizations so that I'm aware of the events that they're hosting that I might want to go to help build my business or strengthen relationships or whatever. But I don't want to review a dozen newsletters that people are sending out, frankly, every single day. It's probably even more than that. So what I did was I built myself a tool that detects emails that are coming in and uses the body of that email to and uses an AI call to classify that email. And for this case, all I'm concerned with are newsletters. So I have a document or I have a description in this process that describes what a newsletter email is. Then I use AI to just classify that email. If it's not a newsletter, we just forget it, drop it, nothing happens, it stays unread in my inbox. If it is a newsletter, however, and I guess I may as well just start sharing my screen so I can demo this. That's the right one. That screen here. So again, I am still using N8N to develop this workflow, and this is another pretty darn simple one that once you know how to use this tool, I think I set this thing up for myself in or maybe 90 minutes, something like that. So these are incredibly easy to build, especially using AI to help you build them. What we're showing here is our workflow to scan for newsletter emails. There's a Gmail trigger, which just says any email that comes into a specific email account, just grab that information. We're going to prepare that email and we're going to give the definition of what a newsletter email looks like. Then we're going to pass it to OpenAI, and all we care about is whether or not this is a newsletter type of email. So we pull out the information we need from the OpenAI response, and we just ask, is this a newsletter or not? If it isn't, nothing happens, the workflow stops. If it is, the first things that we're going to do is apply a folder label, which for Gmail means basically file it in a specific folder. So in this case, I'm telling it, go into a specific folder. In this case, my general/newsletters folder. That's just a dumping ground, so I'm not deleting these. Then I'm going to archive it so it gets out of my inbox. Then I'm going to load a document that I have on my Google Drive that says, here are the things that make an event good for me for my specific type of business. I'm providing context to AI here to tell it who I am and what events are likely beneficial for me to go to. That really is kind of the brains of this entire workflow here. It's just that page-and-a-half document that says, here are the events that are good for me. Then we build a prompt, we send it to OpenAI, and we're then going to OpenAI. What that's going to do is it's going to pull any event information from that newsletter email if it's there. If it is, it extracts that event information and puts it in a Google spreadsheet for me. Okay, not much right now. We just extracted data from an email and throw it in a spreadsheet. Who cares? We care because then at the end of the week, what I have is an automated Friday morning email that is automatically fired for me that goes and reads all of that event information for any number of event newsletters that was put in that spreadsheet, filters whatever ones it needs since the last time it sent me this notification email. So I have this set up as a weekly basis. So basically what newsletters came in the last week that had events on them. If there are any events, then we start loading that ideal event doc. We build a ranking prompt where we're basically saying, classify these things on fit to me. Mm-hmm. We send it to OpenAI to perform that ranking. So it's going to use the ideal event document that I created and use that information to say, we're going to give a ranking from 0 to 1, 1 being the highest, of how relevant is this event to me. And then we're going to parse those out. We're going to send a summary email to me. And then we're just going to mark them in my Google Sheet as that I have been notified of these events. So if you want, I can show the email output as well. And I could have sworn I had it up here prepared for this. Give me 1 second here.
This is unbelievable. It's something that's so small, but it's something that makes so much sense, right? And I'm sure there's advanced versions of these, right? Like,
these are very simple workflows for what these things are capable of.
Understood, but let's just say you were able to take this to the next level and actually extrapolate, have AI recognize that there might have been an events list, or maybe there was, a lot of people CC'd on there. Those people on the email might be potential customers for you. Have that customer list being stored and then draft a personalized email to them, introducing yourself and your services, right? Just a simple process can then be expanded into almost like a lead gen tool, and all of this is automated, and you get a weekly report, you get spreadsheets. This is the world that I live in on a daily basis. I appreciate this so much, and I think visually for our audience, being able to see this is just incredible what you can do. And as Jake mentioned, this is something that is so simple to do. There's a whole lot more that you can do, and it's just really exciting to see this in action. So appreciate you sharing that.
You mentioned lead qualification. That is essentially what we're doing here. Lead qualification is nothing more than how applicable is this potential client to the work that I provide. That's really all that we're doing. But you have to provide that definition to AI for it to know who's a good match for you. We're doing the exact same thing here. So if there are small business owners out there that are wondering how this applies to them, that's a great example. And frankly, is one that I have done that exact process before, where we have a spreadsheet that we might even populate with a tool like Apollo.io that helps us lead source. Yep. And then every time we put a row in a spreadsheet, I can make a trigger every time a row is added to a certain spreadsheet that says, when I'm pasting someone's website or something like that, or name of someone, I can trigger a workflow that goes out and researches that company for me, dumps that information back into a spreadsheet, then uses that researched information against a lead qualification document that I've written up, or like a sales playbook or something that says, here are who my ideal customers are. And I can create a workflow that will loop through and systematically go through as many individual contacts as I want, and provide me a qualification score of who my best matches would be. And if we even want to take it one step further, to your point, anyone who, let's say, is a match over 0.7 or above, they're pretty likely to be a good potential lead. Pre-draft me an email specifically for my services, but not just specific to my services, that relate my services to their actual company, because we've already gone out and researched them anyway. Yep. So you could have this end-to-end lead qualification email drafting system, and all you have to do is copy and paste and plunk a new person in a new row in your spreadsheet, and 30 seconds later, you've got all this other information for them.
And just for the audience's edification here, Apollo, which I'm very familiar with, I use that in my lead gen stuff all the time. For $99 a month, you can get thousands of credits. This is not expensive. This is not inaccessible. You mentioned this before. This is really available to all for just a few dollars a month, and it's amazing what you can do. Thank you for adding color to that.
Yeah. It's great context. I mean, it's literally the same process that I'm showing right here. It's just applied to a different type of information. So for the people who can't see this, what I'm now sharing is the summary email, which admittedly I didn't do a lot of work to make this fancy looking, even though I could have, but it's just coming to me. So who cares? All I'm interested in is the information being presented. So what this summary email, which again is fully automated in terms of how it's being generated, and even how the data is being populated for this, ranks all these different meetings by their fit. So number one is the one that AI determined is the best fit for my organization services. It summarizes what the event is, it says why it's a good fit, and it gives me the link to that event registration. Now I've scrubbed this stuff because I didn't want to include any real data, because actually this first one here is a real email that I received recently. I didn't want anyone's name or anything in that.
Sorry.
But the idea is the same. So as I scroll down here, you'll see, and as I scroll down, these are getting less and less of a ranked fit for me. So, maybe you have further restrictions that you do here. Maybe you only want the top 5 that you have, or maybe you have a threshold where anything under 0.7 or a 70 out of 100 is just you're not concerned with. But for someone like me who wants to go to these events but hates getting flooded with all these, frankly, automated newsletters that people are sending out these days, this is a small time saving, but it helps me just kind of put all this information in one place so I'm not constantly going to an email, going to the website to look at the event, going in my calendar to see if I can do it. Okay, jumping back and registering. It gets to be quite a process when out of these, 6 or 7 emails that are consolidated here, maybe only 1 or 2 of them I actually care about. So,
Right. As an operator, it takes away that decision fatigue, right? Of just trying to figure it out yourself. So, what would you say is there maintenance to this, or is it like you set it up and forget it, or do you feel like you need to go in and make some tweaks?
So AI is inherently variable, and they're built to be that way. That's why we would get different responses to the same question. So you do need to, in my opinion, any automation where you have AI as a component of it, you need to be doing frequent reviews of its output. Because if you're not, it can hallucinate. You might find even just easy ways for you to write in restrictions to the instructions you're passing that will help provide more of consistency. So it's kind of that, like an improvement feedback loop. But for the most part, these automations, once they're set up, unless you change data sources or, in this case, your email address changes or something like that, there's not a lot of maintenance here. This should work pretty consistently. The only thing I would want to very consistently review is what that AI call is doing, but that's no different than any other AI use anywhere. The workflow itself, though, there shouldn't need to be a lot of maintenance done there unless the data that you're giving it changes in some way.
Amazing. And I think this is a good segue into the impact here, right? So I think there's 2 answers that I would love to hear from you. Number one, on the nonprofit side, right? On that side, I would love to understand the impact. You come in, you build these systems. What are they seeing? What are the responses? What are the actual outcomes of the work that you're building to these organizations? And then, of course, to the stuff that you're building for yourself. Walk us through your system before, and then obviously you've implemented these amazing efficiencies within your business. What are you seeing now? What are the results? Just walk the audience through those, because I think this is where, after the aha moment, what is the brass tacks behind it, right? So very curious to hear
the
that.
real measurable thing for the nonprofits, and just for one specific example, I've been working with an organization for the past, starting June, past 8 months or so, back into the fall of last year, that was actually having grant funding that they had been awarded but hadn't received yet. They were having that withheld because they were having data reporting issues. They couldn't, their systems wouldn't allow them to put their data together in a consistent manner to provide to the grantor who required that information to keep issuing the funds. So what happened was, we're running into this problem where the organization had budgeted to receive all this money, and I'm talking tens of thousands of dollars in outstanding grant allocations, but they're just not getting it strictly because they cannot report on their data effectively. And we came in there and built some of these automations to specifically tie into the way that this foundation wanted this data reported out in their CRM. I didn't have to do anything in their CRM to reconfigure it. Essentially, what we did was use N8N to build a reporting engine for them. completely automated, but we built in a module that every month would just send a really brief summary report to the stakeholders at the foundation. Within 2 months after doing that, they were like, here's your $75,000 in grant funds that we've been withholding. Let us know as you want to embark on any more of these projects. We see what you're doing here. We would love to further enable you because we see the efficiencies that you're gaining, which means you're just going to be able to serve more people. That's ultimately what we're trying to do, is just allow these organizations to serve more people. That's all that I care about. I mean, I'd love to put food on my family's table, but that's the mission of these nonprofits, to serve their population and serve as many as they can. And this just frankly allowed them to do that because it made them more efficient as an organization. It offloaded all this reporting time being spent to get data to this foundation, and it was a massive revenue generator because it released all these funds that were being withheld because this foundation couldn't get the data that we enabled here. So even this was less of a time savings. And this is what I mean by enablement, though. I mean, enabling that organization to receive those additional funds. $75,000. Is anyone here rich enough that $75,000 means nothing to that? This is an organization that has 1 full-time and 3 part-time staff people. I mean, that's a huge amount of their operating revenue for the year. And we were able to get that released. And that is an incredibly massive win for an organization like that. It'd be like winning $1 million contract for a small business or something.
Amazing. Congrats on those results. I'm sure they were extremely thrilled, but like you said, the actual impact that you were able to do for them, right? A small organization with a pretty significant amount of funding that came through, that makes an impact. And so I love those stories. What about your business, right? How has AI impacted your business for the better? I'm assuming it's for the better and not the worse, but walk us through that mindset.
So I really, the automation certainly saved me time. I mean, that newsletter one that I just demonstrated, that's a good example of a very small but kind of nice thing that's a little superfluous, but ultimately does provide benefit to someone who just frankly hates going through email.
Sure.
But really for me, I mean, I talked about a little bit before, talked about this session I did for a local college called The Era of Entrepreneurial Enablement. And I really believe that. I really believe right now, and I think I just recently saw, we're recording this on June 4, just recently saw Anthropic's CEO come out and say, graduating computer science students, or maybe it was even more broad than that, should be thinking about starting their own businesses now, because now is your time to do that. And I wish we had recorded this before he said that, so I could actually, lay claim to saying that, and people wouldn't think I'm just BSing. But that's the biggest thing that is done for me, is the enablement and the empowerment to run my business the way that I want to. And I am now able to build and support tools as an individual business owner that I never would have been able to as a software developer 3 to 5 years ago. I have micro SaaS applications deployed for my clients where just the use of AI to help me set up that secure cloud infrastructure has hugely enabled me to just deliver better products and services to my clients. So even getting rid of all the automation and the time savings and efficiencies, I feel like I'm able to provide better services to my customers because this is really empowering me to be more than one person. So it's the same thing we try and do with these nonprofits. We talk about them being understaffed, small amounts of personnel. I want to go as long as I can without having to hire someone, not because I don't want to make more money, because I don't want the headache of having employees. No offense to all the employees out there. You go from 1 to 2 employees, and that's a big step up. And there's a lot of things that have to happen with a small business to do that. For someone like me now, I see a path where I can run a business and make it seem like I have a dev team, make it seem like I have a whole, technical support program. I can produce my own marketing materials so much more efficiently than I could before. The empowerment for individual business owners right now, or even if you're not an individual and you're just small, the tools are accessible to you to do this on your own, or someone like me can help you do it. But the reality of what we're talking about today is these things are such small scale projects compared to traditional large software development, So the automation workflows that we've been talking about a lot today, that's a lot of the work I'm doing these days because it can adapt to any system that anyone has. So I don't have to bring my own tools or anything like that. So you're in whatever you're in, great, we can use it, and just build off of that. So it's really enabled me to expand my services and frankly improve the service I'm able to provide to my client.
Amazing. As you're speaking, I can't help but think of a very good friend of mine, Shalene, who's also in the AI space. She actually teaches folks how to use AI, first introductions to AI. And what she always says is AI will make you a better, stronger, faster version of yourself. Yeah. And that is indeed, right? You essentially became Superman now, right? You have the ability to execute like a big 50-person team. And that is the truth. That is what AI allows you to do. And you have ultimately unlimited scale here because it can expand way faster than the business that you could bring on. So I agree with everything that you just said. This is certainly the right opportunity and the right market to build and to leverage the tools that are made available to everybody. And you don't have to be the biggest AI expert. A few simple to use automations can go a long way. And it was really, really interesting to hear that from you. And, as we're getting to the end of the show today, we have a few more questions. Jake, a lot of our listeners, they run small businesses or nonprofits and they're hearing about AI, but they haven't really taken that leap yet, right? What would you tell them?
First of all, be willing to experiment and get outside your comfort zone. And don't think that AI is a bad word because as we've been discussing here, it's not all about job displacement. In fact, in my opinion, that should be the last thing that it's used for. Be willing to talk to people who might be a little more educated or just experienced with AI use with you, but don't expect that, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, don't expect it's going to be a light switch that you flick on and all of a sudden everything's automated and has AI built into it. That's not the way this stuff works, particularly at the small organization scale. But what you should be thinking about are what are your repetitive, redundant, and administrative tasks. That's always what I tell people. So if it's not client facing, if it's not, generating your revenue, start small. Start with these things like, I don't like looking at all these newsletter emails, or what's another one I did for a client or a nonprofit client recently. They do these training courses. So they have a web intake form when people sign up for these courses, but they use this spreadsheet that a foundation who gives them money to run those courses, they have to use a certain spreadsheet formatted a certain way so that this foundation understands who's going through these courses, the benefit, all those kinds of things. The automation we built, they were manually copying and pasting every single data field from those applications into this spreadsheet. And every single person that applied. The automation there doesn't even require AI. It's just take data from one thing and plunk it in another system. I mean, that's stuff that we could have been doing forever, but that's what I mean by an administrative task, or frankly, that's redundancy right there. That's redundant data entry. That should be the first thing that we automate and get rid of, because there's absolutely no value add to that. It's just kind of a requirement because of the funder here. So if we can spend 90 minutes one time setting up that automation so that every single time it happens in the future, it takes 0 seconds because it's completely automated. Those are the kinds of things that you should be looking at first, in my opinion. They're the easiest to accomplish. They have visible, easy to understand results from them. And you don't have to worry about the complexities of, multiple different systems or requirements. It's just one thing passing data back and forth. And there can be a lot of power just in that.
For someone who wants to start building this week, for example, where would you say, or what would you tell them that they should start beginning?
If they want to start, the first thing I would say is go to ChatGPT or Claude and start asking it questions about what you want. I'm not kidding. It's kind of a joke with people that I talk to, but whenever I ask people, how did you learn how to use AI? They're like, oh, I asked AI how to use it. And, it's this recursive snake eating its own tail kind of thing. But honestly, if people wanted to do this, I do think that AI is a great place to start for that research. So if you have a $20 a month plus subscription or whatever they're calling it these days to ChatGPT, go turn on deep research and tell it what type of business you are and the kind of efficiency issues you're having or something. And if you're listening to this conversation right now and want to explore N8N specifically, tell it that. Tell it you want to explore how N8N could benefit your business and what use cases you're looking for there. And it'll go out and it'll find examples of people doing exactly that. It'll go scrub Reddit boards and find the people who are writing about exactly these types of things. So I hate to give you kind of a non-answer for that, but the reality is that's the best research tool for things like that these days is go ask one of these LLMs to do some research for you and just dive deeper with whatever sounds the best for what it returns.
Absolutely. And what's next for you, right? More nonprofit builds, other sectors. What do you have on the horizon?
What I want to do is I'm continuing to work on my relationships with my local nonprofits here. I want to become our de facto, for lack of a better term, technology consultant for nonprofits in my area so that I have partnerships with a number of foundations in town that when a emerging or less mature nonprofit comes to them for some kind of capacity scale up grant or something like that, that I'm the first person they point to say, go talk to him. He'll help you scope out projects and you guys will figure it out. That's kind of my near-term goal for this year is to establish those foundation relationships. Long-term, I see the best avenue for significant recurring revenue for my business in this, what I refer to and I've seen other people refer to as the micro SaaS business. And what I mean by that is not a web application that needs tens of thousands of users to be profitable, but very narrow tools for a very specific population where if I have 20 to 50 clients and I'm making a couple $1,000 a month from that, that's sufficient because I have other sources of revenue as well. So I kind of believe that we're at the beginning of the end of the true monolithic SaaS platforms for this specific reason. And all the things we've been talking about today, the end user enablement to build things on their own, I think will slowly erode that SaaS model here. But I think that there's still going to be opportunity for those kind of very specific tools for very specific processes. But again, if I don't have to worry about selling it to 1 million people, it's much more achievable for someone like me to serve 100 clients instead of 1 million.
Well, take a look at your nonprofit grant writing tool, right? Like you package that into a micro SaaS.
Yep.
You use your lead gen to go after every single nonprofit in the US and potentially even internationally. You use your automation tools to create a lead gen outreach program where people will find you. And if it's self-serve, right? You just have people that are using it. You already have testimonials built in, right? That's the big picture, right? You trialed and error. You built something that works, right? We talked about that $75,000 grant that was successful. Can you repeat this, right? And would someone pay maybe not $2,000 a month, but would a nonprofit pay a few $100s a month, right?
Right.
And the answer is why wouldn't they, right? Because the return on that would be huge. So. I hope everyone here is taking this, being inspired and thinking about what they can do next. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, there's an infinite number of ways that you can implement this stuff, and Albie, you just went through a great way of chaining tools together, which is really how we start deriving some real kind of almost mind-blowing power of these systems. I mean, what I have demoed today could be, to your point, one component of a larger automation where, I mean, when we start talking about agentic tools, we're starting to get into that realm where we're having AI make decisions for us. But you can do that with the workflows, the simple workflows that I showed. That newsletter filtering one, that's essentially using AI. It's like it's somewhat agentic because it's using AI to make a decision, and then it's following a certain process given the results of that decision. And that's really what agentic systems are doing. So you can build these things small scale for yourself. These are not only available to Meta and Google and Lockheed Martin. These are available to all of us today.
Absolutely.
Inspiration is the right word. I hope that is. I hope that is what people are taking away from this. And the sky is kind of the limit. We're hugely enabled to do it, and I love having a platform to talk about this stuff because I believe strongly in it, and I frankly can't wait to see what other people do with this stuff in the near future.
Me too.
Great, thank you. Where can our listeners find you, Jake, and learn more about GxP Solutions?
So gxpsolutions.net, because someone is squatting on the .com. Thanks a lot for that. I'm on the East Coast. I'm in Maryland. I'm around Baltimore and DC and Frederick and stuff. For anyone who knows the area, I'm always hopping around doing that. I'm on LinkedIn. Just search my name here, GxP Solutions, and you'll find me. I'm hopefully going to be doing more of this kind of stuff. I admittedly am the worst social media person in the world, although I'm not upset about that. So don't expect to find me on Facebook or anything like that. I have no interest in but no, my website, LinkedIn. If anybody's interested in it, I'm always happy to have an open conversation, and if needed, happy to distribute. Well, you can always contact me through my website, I guess, but would happy to distribute my work email, and keep your eye out for some products, because I'm definitely going to be releasing some of these SaaS tools over the next 12 months for both the nonprofit and commercial space. So hopefully I'll be able to leverage my existing footprint for those.
Amazing. Jake, thank you so much for coming on. This was really, in my opinion, a very important one, right? AI does not have to be about replacing humans or cutting costs at giant companies, right? It could really about helping a small team do more good, and you really proved that today.
Great. I'm happy to. It's all in service of those nonprofit organizations and everything, but I love educating as well. So if even one person, that old adage, if even one person took something from this, I feel great about that. I love helping other people. I've gotten a lot of help along my journey, and take whatever you do from this and go start your own journey. I guess it's the sky's the limit. So.
Yep.
And to everyone listening, if you've built or deployed something with AI that actually works, especially something that helps people around you, we want to hear about it. So head on over to 120octane.com.
And until next time, stay building.